Hello and welcome to your award-winning The Reasons I'm Broke podcast, bringing you the reasons we're broke, ranging from comics, movies, TV, video games, and more. I'm Daniel, and your other host this week is someone who is in mainly the world of gaming, but I know him as someone who also enjoys the things that make us broke, such as TCGs, gaming, movies, TV. And he is making his debut here as a guest on the Reasons I'm Broke podcast. You can check out his channel where he also does unboxings, he does commentaries, he covers news, does podcasts as well. And it is Logan from Bandana Gaming. Welcome on, sir.
So much for having me. I greatly appreciate this, good sir. Thank you.
It's
Looking
very
forward
good
to this discussion we're going to have today.
Yeah, it's definitely one that kicked off its own episode. I read this and I'm like, all right, Logan and I more or less align on some of what's going on right now in media. So I thought that you'd be great to have on for this episode. But first, to give the Brokettes a reason as to why they should care. I know why Logan is on and I appreciate and value his opinion, but please let them know what your channel is about and exactly what you normally deep dive on there. And then at the very end, we'll link it up as well. But yeah, please let them know what media you cover on your channel.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. So I'm the gaming channel to end all gaming channels. I'm just the best, right? No, okay. Bandana Gaming, we cover gaming news, reviews, gameplay, you name it. Right during this time of year, we really focus on products and controllers and stuff like that. I cover that throughout the year, but that's really my shtick, I guess you can say, because that's what people really tune into the channel for. They just really like my opinion on what's going on and my blunt honesty on new products, especially controllers. Now, I also host a podcast of my own called Ready to Start Podcast with a friend of mine named Nick Dool, goes by Click to Enlarge. And we do every Thursday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. We cover topics of the gaming industry. And then at the end of it, we have what's called a side quest where we talk about whatever the audience wants to talk about. And that is where we will touch on comics, movies, and anything, I guess you can say, in geek culture or nerd culture, whatever you want to, however you want to address that.
So someone who definitely has this pulse on the things, again, that we love on here. So let's talk about this article. In case you missed it, we're going to go through a bullet point on this. I'm not going to read out the article as is. This is a summary, but this was going on throughout X, throughout Facebook, and even comic creators got in and started talking and responding to this article. So first, this went up on ICV2, which, from what I remember, is an offshoot of Diamond, who is a distributor of comic books. And they have hosted articles before by Phil Boyle, who's the owner of Coliseum of Comics, which any Brokettes outside of Florida, it's basically like the chain or kind of like Midtown or Graham Crackers of Florida. So you'll have various Coliseum of Comics throughout Florida. And full disclosure, I used to work at Coliseum of Comics, and anything I do say on here does not represent the company at all. I'm mainly covering my experience in the comic industry, but it just so happens that I've met Phil before and I definitely wanted to read this. And again, it did kind of catch fire online for good and bad reasons. So we're going to go over some of the bullet points here and see if this really is the issue of why comic books are struggling right now. So in the approaching year of 2024, this is all, again, a summary of what Phil wrote. Concerns are mounting in the comic industry, so he said that this decline is evident in plummeting comic sales. And what makes all of this more perplexing is that a network of passionate advocates for comics has organically grown across the United States and the world, yet it seems that it's been exploited for short-term gains and corporate bonuses. So he's talking about Disney, he's talking about AT&T. I don't think we're talking about your Boom, IDWs. So you've been in this long enough. Did you notice that change when Marvel got bought up by the Rat or when DC got bought up by Warner Brothers, AT&T, now Discovery?
Oh, I started noticing it a little before. I think it really got worse when Disney bought Marvel. DC, I don't think was as bad as quickly. I think it was around the time of, what was the last of the like 10 reboots DC did. Not
There
the
was
one after
Future
New 52.
Rebirth. Yeah, they did a
Rebirth.
Rebirth and then a Future State as well, sort of. That was supposed to be 5G.
Right. Yeah. Rebirth is where I kind of pulled back, and Marvel started doing the Marvel Now, which, in my opinion, is where everything just took a nosedive. Once they started doing all these alternate, I guess you can say, I don't know how else to call it, diverse versions of Captain America, of Iron Man, of Thor, and stuff like that, people started going, hey, wait, what are you doing here?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's around the time when things started to really nosedive. And for me, I pulled back completely from Marvel when they made Captain America hate America. And I went, yeah, I'm done. Well, I can't remember the name of the writer. He has a really funky name. I'm sorry, I just don't remember it, but it was a name that I couldn't remember. And I read this one book, and all he is talking about how bad America is and all this stuff. I'm like, I'm done. And I'm like, I literally went to Coliseum because that's where I have my books. And I discontinued my subscription for all of Marvel the next day.
By the way, thank you for doing that instead of just not showing up. And this wasn't at my store, but I've had it where subscribers, they just ghost. It's like, no, tell us you want to leave. Like, no, this ain't a gym membership where you get shamed into like, no, come on, stay on. It's like, cool, I can order less now. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, actually, I still kept my subscription. I just said no more Marvel. And then I was already done with DC because I didn't like what they were doing with Green Lantern, and what they've been doing with Superman is just atrocious. So I said, okay, I'm done. I'll just read. I was reading Ninja Turtles and Power Rangers, and I'm not a big fan of where they're going now. And I stopped reading the Magic the Gathering books too, because it just got cringe. And I was like, okay, what do I read now? So.
And that is something that Phil brought up on here. He said that attempts to attract new readers through changes like character swaps, gender bending, have not resulted in a one-to-one conversion, which instead further diminished the existing customer base. That's something that I noticed is anytime, not even putting aside like a new gay character or whatever that's trying to attract the younger readership, which I get, you're trying to do that. And it's like, hey, they're reading manga. Come on over and get some comics too. I get that that's the goal, right? You want to get kids into comics because those are your future customers. But instead, what was happening is they were alienating their existing readership, which were in their 40s plus, and they were instead going, what's all this about? Where's Steve Rogers? I think the Infinity game or movie had just come out, the Infinity Gems, and they had all these characters that were not Steve Rogers or Iron Man in the comics. So I had all these people coming in that had just seen the Infinity Gems, and they're like, hold on a second, where's, can I get the Thor book? It's like, it's She-Thor. It's not really. So it was tougher. I remember that being such a confusing. Yeah.
Avengers Endgame. That's when that really hit. I wouldn't say Avengers Infinity War was really the catalyst. I think Endgame was that catalyst that people were like, who are all these characters? Nobody to worry about.
And they didn't bring in a new readers. You would have your MCU fans, like, for example, Black Panther. I had maybe 2 weeks of people coming in, buying the Black Panther Funkos, the trades, the single issues, and then they would disappear. And that happened with every major Marvel movie. It isn't like Invincible where I can forever sell Invincible trade paperbacks because they want to know what happens next. With these new characters, they were not sticking around. They did not care. They wouldn't even buy. If anything, speculators were buying them, and not because they cared about the character. They were just looking to flip it on eBay the very next day, sometimes the same day. So it did not work, and they're doubling down on it. I'm seeing it now with the current comics. It's like, so you're going to keep doing this? It's not leading to more sales. Instead, it's the variants, I think, that are slowly kind of keeping it all together.
Be honest, I haven't bought a Marvel or DC book since the end of 2021.
That sounds about right.
But what's ridiculous, it's not just that. That's not the only thing that's been pushing me away from comics. And I know you're going to get to it in a minute, but the stories are terrible.
Mm-hmm.
and the characters just aren't the characters we grew up with. And then they're also trying to nickel and dime us to death.
Exactly. And that's something that Phil also touches on here. Stories being, I think, the biggest issue, because give me, sure, new characters, variations of it. If the story's great, it's going to hit. Like you have Miles Morales, which took off. It was fine. It's one of those examples of why not make him into a new Spider-Man? Why does he have to have Spider-Man? Well, because it worked. It worked in that case. It worked with Thor to an extent, but the talent is not there for what they're currently trying and what they're currently doing. And I'll get to Mark Miller's comment. He kind of talked about that. But just to kind of start to wrap up Phil's article here, he said that retailers have been forced to make uncertain decisions, nickel and diming, as you were saying, 2 issues ahead of when they're supposed to order. So anyone not in, some inside baseball here, comic shops have to order 3 months ahead of when that issue releases. And if that issue has a final order cutoff date, that's when the publishers say, hey, by this date, get your final numbers in. So you have about a month and a half, sometimes less, to really push a book and let your readership know, hey, there's this new book coming out, Department of Truth #1. James Tynion IV is writing it. Do you want it? Because I know you're reading Batman. And you try to get as many subs on there as possible so that you get the most accurate number. But what Marvel and Marvel's the most guilty of this, at least they were when I was working at the shop, was they would want their numbers for 2, 3, and 4, for example, or if it was a weekly, they would want all your numbers before even #1 came out. And that would cause shops to either massively overorder or massively underorder, which I think both sides lose. And I don't know why they like to play these games, but that pisses off the retailer, pisses off the reader, because they're suddenly, maybe it's a book that hits and they want to read it. You got to wait for the second printings. So it's just one of those things that they are hurting retailers on, and they're also pushing the dollar. He's saying that return the price of comics to $3.99. How feasible do you think that is when your bottom line is being looked at by the big two?
To be honest, I think he said in the article he would prefer $2.99, but $3.99 is more realistic.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't see it happening, especially with today's economy. It's just not plausible, which is sad because it brings me to another thing that he said in the article with the millions of different variant covers.
Yep.
So I'm one of those guys, especially when it was Turtles or Power Rangers, I tried to get all the covers, but Marvel's guilty and so is DC. They'll put out 5 different covers of the same book, and then one cover will be regular price and another one will be $2 more. Another one will be a $30 cover. And I'm like, all right, I can't do this anymore. I just can't. So it doesn't matter that the base book is $4 or $5. All the cool ones are 3 to 4 times the price. And I went, okay, I'm done. I'm done. Just give me the base book and that's it. And that still adds up. When you have 10 books, you already look at $50.
One of the things he proposed was limiting the max number of covers to each comic to 2.
Yes.
And focusing on an engaging cover art. Now, I will say, I multiplied my sales by pushing the variants, to be honest with you. I had a little Facebook group for the comic shop. A lot of subs were on there, the ones that were like variant hunters. And I'd say, here's the final order cutoff variants. Let me know what you want. And from there, I would get hundreds of dollars more every week in sales just from that. So I don't know. Variants do raise the income for the shop. It's just, but I get it. If you have too many options, then, how many most people are passing on covers C through F.
Yeah. For example, like Ninja Turtles, I only get cover B because it's an Eastman cover. I'm like, if there's anything else, now I'm hard pass. You guys got too many covers out. It's just too much to keep up with.
The nice thing is I was able to vote with my dollar. So in other words, if no one pre-ordered that variant, I was like, okay, I'm not getting any. So hopefully that tells them maybe we should print less.
That makes sense.
Here's one where Phil suggested that editors emphasize the role of editors in maintaining story quality and avoid agenda-driven narrative. So that's kind of what we were discussing. There was this big pushback against this from longtime readers where they were saying that comics have always been political, which they're not wrong. Stories like Jon Stewart, Green Lantern, that was a big deal when it first came out. Like, why are you having this character? keep the politics out. Like Neil Adams' story, Denny and Neil, was about current events, and it was in the comic. So where do you stand on that, where sometimes comics throughout history have been a reflection of the times, and he's suggesting that maybe we have some less of that? And I don't know. I'm kind of on both minds on this one.
Okay. Now, where I stand is, I would say I would use the same expression of both minds, but I don't mind politics. I don't like identity politics in my comics. I don't mind dealing with situations that are, mainstream, that are actually happening. But when you're dealing with identity politics, not everything has to be about race or sexual orientation or stuff like that. You can write a good story. The 90s, I think, were a great example of that, because especially with the X-Men, I was a big fan of the X-Men, especially in the 90s, and they were able to address these situations without getting so in your face about it, especially no identity politics. That's my thing. That's where I draw the line. And especially when you take a character and add an agenda or something like that into it that defies the character, that's not modern day politics. That's your personal politics. Again, going back to making Captain America hate Captain America. Making Captain America hate America. That's just your personal politics. That's not the character. And that is where my problems come in with comic books, because comic books are made for a wide audience, not just somebody on Twitter/X or Tumblr. It's not who they're for. Mm-hmm. They're for the majority of the population. And there's a lot of people, the majority of the people don't want that shoved in their faces. Hey, it's cool if that's your thing, whatever, that's on you. But a lot of us, we just want a good story. We want that good Batman book again. We want that good Superman. We want that good X-Men. We want Captain America to be patriotic again. And that's where a lot of us, people that I know especially, have really drawn the line when it comes to politics in books.
I'm glad you brought up the X-Men, because maybe a solution would be, because I think the big two have teams already that would better explore whatever they want to push. It's like, okay, if you got your X-Men, you can tell stories about discrimination that reflect whatever might happen today in a more tasteful way. I think because you have these characters already built into it. You have the mutants, which always served as kind of that symbol of when they wanted to, okay, it could be a symbol for what was happening to the gay community at the time, or, any oppressed group. They used the X-Men for that. There was one where they used the Jew character, and they brought that into it. So maybe the idea
Sabra?
should be, I think it was Kitty Pryde, I think.
Oh, okay.
But maybe that's
Sabra
a solution.
was a mutant. Sabra was a mutant.
Instead of putting it in like Superman as well, or all these different books, keep it at the ones that would make more sense, like team books like X-Men, maybe even Teen Titans. That's naturally going to be a younger demographic, so maybe you can, I just less of it and more focused, I think, would be a better solution.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, there's comic books has a place for pretty much everybody, but you also don't want to alienate the majority of readers just to push one person's opinion. And that's what's been going on lately. So that's also a problem that we've seen. That's a problem that I've seen reading books, especially in the last, I would say, since 2020, especially.
This next one, I think, is another very difficult one to do. Just like cutting down variants would be new characters. He says, introduce them sparingly and organically rather than shoehorning them into existing stories. The reason this is difficult is, although now it's been done to death, so maybe they can actually do it now, but what was happening, especially like when Punchline came out or Clown Killer, every single arc, there was a new character that was coming out, which would spike sales. The Red Goblin was another one. It would get all these speculators in, and they would want to sub to just that story arc because they want to own the first, the second, the third appearance of Red Goblin, plus any other new character that might come out. And publishers saw this, and they told comic creators, introduce a new character in this arc because it spikes sales. And they did. And it did for a while. So that's one of those things that I understand why they did it, because sales kept coming. Everyone wanted to own the latest new character in case they're the new Harley Quinn or the new Deadpool.
One thing that I've noticed, I don't know how up to date you are with your X-Men. I pulled back and recently I've taken a look. I don't even recognize the teams anymore. I don't recognize any of the characters. And every time I look, there's a new character.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, who are these people? Why does this dude kind of look like a Professor X, but you ordered him from wish.com? I'm like, who are these characters? I mean, why would I want to read them when all these, and don't get me started about how bad they're drawn, but that's another story. Art is just not good these days in comics, but I don't know any of these characters. And I'm like, how are you trying to sell this to me when you've got a book that doesn't even say X-Men, it says blah, blah, blah of X and all these bunch of characters I don't know. Why would I even bother picking it up?
These last couple of points that Phil had were addressing discounts. So he suggests minimums for each title set by store, so based per account, which I immediately brushed off because I'm like, neither of the big two is going to take the time to spreadsheet out all of the stores. Even though it's diminishing the number of comic shops, it's still a lot. They're not going to spend the time and energy to set minimums for each shop. But he was suggesting that brick and mortar retailers get, if they order over the minimum, that they would get any additional issues at 60 cents per issue, which would encourage retailers to order up. And I agree, but I think instead the solution should be returnability, which I had pretty good success with. And I always enjoyed when it's like, okay, this issue number 1 is returnable. So if I had 3 pre-orders on it and it's returnable, I'm going to order 14 or 20. Whereas if I didn't, if it was not returnable, I might order maybe 8. It'd be pushing it. But I think returnability for me, just based on experience, would be a better solution, which I'm glad some of the indie publishers do actually still input.
I didn't know that comic book stores could do that.
Only qualifying issues. That was the thing. It was usually just for number 1s. Marvel played this fucking game at one point where they're like, okay, Captain America 28, if you order 60% of what you ordered on the previous issue, you get this discount. It's like, I'm not going to order more of the next issue. Readership doesn't go up over time on a series. It goes down. So that didn't make sense to me. But when Dan DiDio was still at DC, there was returnability on new number 1s, which I was like, great. As soon as Dan DiDio got fired or let go or left, it got a lot less retailer friendly. Dan was someone who is friends with Phil, and they were always discussing what to do for brick and mortar stores. But ever since he's been gone, there hasn't been that head of DC that connects with retailers. And because of that, they've dropped out a lot of these incentives, unfortunately. However people may feel about DiDio, he was good for retailers. And it's unfortunate that it's gone the way of, like I said, as soon as he was let go, we have 2 Marvel comics now. One's called DC, and they're basically the same.
You're right.
There were some responses to this article, and one of them which was Mark Miller. And I used to like his comics, but he's on X. He's been one of those that's said some things that I've heavily disagreed with. And he suggested that as far as the talent behind comics, he said that one of Phil's points were to get the quality of comics up by having better talent on these books instead of up-and-comers. And he said that'd be great, but their rates for DC and Marvel are so low, they no longer pay them $1,000 per page like they used to. They now pay $90 per page. And because of that, they've priced out higher paying talent that you want on there that's going to be quality. And they instead get the up-and-comers because they're like, oh, I want to work on Batman. That's my dream. It's like, yeah, come on, kid. We'll pay you $90 a page. And they're just happy to be there. So instead, the older talent, they're going to Substack, Kickstarter, Image Comics, whoever's willing to pay them. And that's kind of the deal. And they were like, if they want the talent, they're going to have to pay. But that's another one of those that I don't see Disney or Warner Brothers Discovery raising that bottom line for anyone. They're going, here's your budget, make it work.
I just realized I don't follow him on X. So I was just taking a look to see some of the things that you were referencing there. But a couple of the people that I follow don't either. Mark Miller was famous for what?
So he did Why the Last Man? I want to say he was, but I read his Image books that were coming out. There was one that was like about wizards and witches that I really enjoyed.
Oh, but Kick-Ass.
Yeah, Kick-Ass and
Kick-Ass. Okay. So yeah, he wasn't, he didn't do a lot of the stuff that I read.
he did Civil
That's why
War,
I'm not too familiar with him.
Old Man Logan,
Okay, that I did read. That I did
Kingsman,
read. It was okay. Old Man Logan was all right.
Jupiter's
It's
Legacy.
funny because now people call me that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean we're old, man. We're getting there.
Yeah, I just turned 40, so yeah, people have been calling me that. Okay, I see what he's doing. Because I do follow a number of comic book artists and readers and writers and all that stuff on X these days. And it's interesting to see their different takes. I will say that.
The Magic Order was the one I was thinking of, which is the one I was reading up until on Twitter at the time. He said he called BVS the modern day Vietnam. And I was like, what a dumb fucking thing to say. And that's when I was like, all right, you're one of those.
As in Buena Vista?
Not quite, no. Batman v Superman.
Oh.
The modern day Vietnam.
I don't understand that reference.
I guess he was calling it a tragedy, or it's a dumb comparison. It's not, you don't compare a war, whether or not you agree with it, but that massive loss of life to a fucking movie you didn't like.
That's what, sure. Okay. Everyone's got their opinion. I don't see how it, I'm not going to lie. I was not the biggest fan of BVS because there wasn't much S in the BVS.
Zach did say that this was
Superman in it.
I remember Zach said that this was a way for him to make a Batman movie. Like, he's like, what if he fights Batman? And they're like, okay, that's an idea. And they weren't able to top that idea. They're like, oh my God, if he fights Batman, I mean, how do you get higher than that? Lex Luthor, okay, we can work that in, but Batman, like, fuck.
That's probably the only reason why I didn't like that movie more. I'm like, wait, she's in the title. And he had less lines than Spider-Man had in Captain America Civil War. That was actually counted out. And I was like, wow, that is true. And he's a title character. But I did love Man of Steel. That is my favorite Snyderverse movie.
Yeah, that's my favorite one. I was in between that and the Snyder Cut, but I really like Man of Steel.
Not gonna lie, I really couldn't get through Snyder Cut. It's so long.
It's not for everyone.
No, it was good. I need, what is it, 10 hours long? No.
I wish it were. Then we'd get the Green Lantern scene that he wasn't allowed to use. Supposedly there was dialogue during the history lesson. We might have gotten that.
I didn't want to see. I wanted to see him bring in Green Lantern. Which one was he supposed to bring in?
John Stewart. That's right. But Warner Brothers told him, no, we have plans for John Stewart. And what is this, 6 years later now and nothing?
See, I'm a big fan. I'm not going to lie. My favorite Green Lantern is Hal Jordan. I liked Ryan Reynolds as Hal Jordan. Everyone's got their take. Everyone's got that one that will cause everybody to riot, and that is my take.
I always cheat with mine. I'm like Sinestro, the greatest Green Lantern of all time. It's in the book. They say it.
But what did you think about that movie?
The Green Lantern Jeff Johns one? I'm not a fan of it. I liked Mark Strong as Sinestro. But it's one of those that, again, proves that just because you can write comics doesn't mean you can write movies. Yeah,
and what's funny is I was like, oh, Jeff Johns, he's been writing all that Green Lantern stuff I love. The movie's got to be great. It was all right. It could have been worse. It could have been Birds of Prey.
Or The Flash.
Oh,
that movie made less money than Green Lantern. Amazing to me. Well, let's go into that real quick just to wrap up today's episode on, because this is a broader picture. So Phil has some solutions in here, which I think we agree on, and some of which I don't think we both know probably would not work in today's market. And the readership has, since I saw it, at least toward the end of my days there, was going more into the independent market, which is great. There's plenty of indie comics. If you want a comic, it's out there for you, but sometimes you got to find it on Kickstarter or through a publisher you've never bought, like maybe Top Cow or whomever. It's out there, and in readerships.
There's a big one that I've just gotten into recently. Don't know if you've heard of them. It's called the Rippaverse. They came out with ISOM #1 and #2. Now they released a new one on Kickstarter. Is it Kickstarter? No, they're doing a crowdfunding, and it's called Alpha Core.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm really liking this. I still haven't picked up #2 yet. I think it's still multiple different covers are still available, but they do this thing where they do a crowdfunding for each issue.
Yeah.
And the first issue was just fantastic. If you haven't checked it out, I would definitely recommend it. It's from the Rippaverse. You guys can check them out. And I think Eric July is doing a great job with this book, and I'm looking forward to seeing what else they do.
Yeah, that's the nice thing, is that at least in this era, you can take your idea, your comic, and hopefully crowdfund it to make it happen, which is really nice, because it was a lot more difficult to do that in the 90s or 80s or even in the early 2000s.
I don't even think you were able to do that in the 90s.
Maybe if you went to a local publisher, there were some people that would do, they call them underground comics now, but I think they'd be considered independent as well. They would go to their local printers and they would literally hand sell it to comic shops.
That's right. I remember going into my local one, and I would see a stack of comic books that said like This Guy Comics.
Yep.
And I was like, wait, what? And there's just some random comic book name. Yeah. And I was like, okay. And sometimes they were giving them away for free. Sometimes they were selling them, but they were never really expensive. So I think I might have a couple of those that I picked up over the years, but I'd have to look through my collection. My collection's too big. So,
well, as we have seen, the big two are going, again, doubling down on this. So I don't think this is going to change anytime soon, in spite of what sales may be. Right. But this is just a snapshot, I think, of what's happening in media overall. I think we're seeing this in movies. We're seeing this in TV, although to a lesser extent, we were talking off mic about how comics are more evident of this, because I think the effect hits them quicker. But as far as movies, I mean, you'll have a lot more options, shows. You can find a great show, but when you're seeing like the big change in the MCU, which I haven't seen any of recently, but from what I hear, these same changes are happening in movies and TVs, and finally the audience is catching up and going, you know what, this stuff isn't that good, and our viewership is going down, ticket sales are going down. The Miss Marvel's movie just came out. Apparently it's a flop.
Lowest MCU opening ever, opened lower than The Flash at 46.7, I think is what they said. 46.7 million.
Absolutely embarrassing. Yeah. And I had one person on Facebook that's like, you guys are crying, they made 46 million. It's like, you don't get it. They lost millions.
Yes, they lost, and they will continue to lose. And if they keep this track up, Marvel is going to go the way of the dinosaurs. They're going to become extinct. They'll just be a memory of American culture, of a bygone era.
Well, what do you think the issue is? Is it a mandate from these big companies saying, we need to check off this list. We need to have this kind of character, this kind of story. We need to reflect this audience member. Do you think that's what, or is there a bigger issue at hand here?
I think it's that. And I also think it's the people that they're getting need to check off these boxes. And instead of checking the boxes of, hey, the audience who made comic books what it is, what do they want? No, they're listening to the Twitter or the Tumblr or the Hollywood people that think they know best, when we're the ones who supported this industry for, like I said, I'm 40. So we're talking about 35 years. I've been reading comic books since the late, I want to say like 90, 91. So instead of listening to people like us who know what a good comic book is, because we're the ones who go, oh, this is good. Listen to those people. Don't listen to Karen over there. Don't. That's my thing. If you pay attention to who was buying your product and you listen to what they have to say, you'll probably make more money. But hey, that's just common sense business. But hey, what do I know? I'm just a guy who talks about video games on the internet.
Well, there's not a lot of common sense right now in the movie industry. And I'll admit, I'm not the guy. I don't know either. Like I personally, I'm saying for me, I would not want to run the comic movie industry, because I'm the guy that was saying Five Nights at Freddy's, it's too late for that fucking movie. Why are they making it now? That should have been made 5 years ago. And it made a shit ton of money. And that's when I was like, oh, what the fuck do I know? There's a fucking audience out there for it. So
I've never played the game. I have a friend that did. And I was like, all right, let me take a crack at it. I heard this is a pretty interesting franchise. Oh, I enjoyed the movie. My wife and I watched it. We're like, that was pretty good. I mean, compared to everything we've seen before, it was actually in the last couple of years, that was actually really good.
See,
so it was enjoyable.
Yeah. That it goes to show again what I know, because I would not have greenlit that one. Or even that what made something floored me recently. I think it was the Barbie movie. I was really hoping it would fail because it's a Warner Brothers production, and it made over $1 billion. I was like, okay, another one that I never would have guessed. So have you seen any of this that we're discussing in the world of gaming? Has it started to affect that as far as maybe sales being or agendas being driven into gaming?
I could go on for hours and hours and hours about this. This is a conversation and a topic we actually touch on quite a bit on our podcast on Ready to Start, because yes, it happens quite a bit. There's been a big thing with Lara Croft, uglifying her. The new Fable, the main character is actually it's supposed to be a woman, and they made it look like one of the guys who's a producer. And it's just people like, ugh. And then you've got the issues with games like Baldur's Gate, where it's just, why don't they call it Baldur Sex? Because the majority of the game is about sex. Oh yeah, there's some D&D playing in it, but no, everyone's focusing on that. And then the whole drama with Starfield. So yes, there's plenty of it in the gaming industry, and I can go on for hours and hours, like I said, and we've talked about it quite a bit on multiple episodes. So yes, it has gotten it's stunk its nasty little claws into the gaming industry as well.
Yeah, I think now that you mention it, I never played the game. I'm not too big of a PlayStation guy, but I heard that The Last of Us 2 a few years back was pretty controversial. So yeah, I guess it's pretty pervasive as well in the industry.
Yes. Any of the, I guess you could say, geek industries have been invaded by this virus, or whatever you want to call it. Mind virus, some are saying.
It's just loud. I think it's loud voices, and it's very easy. I think it's harder to do now, but it was very easy to immediately point and be like, oh, you're just a man, you're a straight guy that doesn't want this, or you're a racist. Hysterism. Yeah, and it's like that was the easy, like, okay, it's not. It has, like, I think we're over that now. It's like know it's not about that. It's right. It's about the I think the transparency or the non-genuine way that they're working these things into it. And again, it's not an issue when it's done well and it works, but unfortunately, more times than not, it's just we need to make sure this is in here, because otherwise the online armies are going to get mad at us for not including a single whatever character in here. And they're afraid of that. But these are the people that, as you were saying, they're not buying this shit, or they're going to buy it anyway because they want to play the latest whatever game. So that's not who they need to worry about. They're not the ones. They're the ones that are on X and going, oh, I applaud them for making that character. Are you buying that issue? No, I'm not.
Correct. Facts right there, sir. That is 110% the truth.
When they most recently they announced the Static Shock movie like 2 years ago, and I'm like, put him in a team movie. He's not gonna. And my friend's like, oh no, I'd go and watch that. Or it's like, you haven't even. There's a Static Shock comic out now that I can't sell for the life of me. No one cares.
I would say if the Static Shock movie was introduced maybe a decade ago, maybe, but now people aren't. No, they're going to think it's just pandering.
Well, watch it hit $1 billion, because again, if I say it's going to fail, apparently it does amazing. So, well, Logan, I know you're on a time limit here, so
yes.
So we're going to wrap up today. And again, I want to thank you for going over this ICV2 article, which I will link on X, and I will put it up on the description of today's show notes. But please let them know where they can find you if they want to continue the conversation, and where they can find you if they want to subscribe to your channel.
Well, first I want to say thank you for having me on, and thank you for your audience actually listening to me and my ramblings and rants, because that's what a lot of people seem to be doing lately, is just rambling on. And I'm good at that. But if you want to hear more of it, you can check me out on YouTube at Red Bandana Gaming, Instagram under Red Bandana Gaming, Facebook at Red Bandana Gaming. Now on X, it's a little different, at RBG_retro. I'm most active on Instagram and Facebook. I usually use Twitter/X just to talk with people in the industry and get guests and stuff like that. But we haven't had guests on our podcast for a while. We're reworking that, and that's going to be a new thing. But yes, you can check us out on my channel, YouTube. That's the best place to go. Red Bandana Gaming. And then, like I said, we have our podcast, myself, Nick Duell, which is Click to Enlarge as well. And we're every Thursday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. And that's where you can catch us, where we talk about spicy stuff just like this.
And there will be links as well in the description of today's episode to Logan's channel. I know I personally always enjoy when you cover Microsoft and Xbox in a positive light. I'm always on there, and I'm like, yeah, let me add some algorithm to this video right here.
For Microsoft.
It's not like they work for me in a way.
You're right. You're right.
And to the Brokettes,
that's actually an ongoing joke.
Pretty much. And the Brokettes know about it. They know about my bias at this point.
Yes.
And to you on the other side, thank you so much for joining us this week for this coverage on the state of comics. If you have a different experience on the readership of comics, let's say you are enjoying DC, Marvel, or you're not, please let us know why you've dropped down on the readership or why you're still reading the same number of DC or Marvel books that you read 5 or 10 years ago. As always, you can find us on X, Twitter, Discord, Facebook, Instagram. And this week, if you have some TCG cards, especially if you're in the UK area for Brokettes, go to treefroggrading.com and use discount code BROKE to get 5% off your submission. So they submit Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon, Magic, and they have that awesome Tree Frog Grading logo and presentation that I really enjoy. And you've seen the unboxing on YouTube. Once again, discount code BROKE. So I've been Daniel, joined by Logan, and Broquette Core. All will be well.